So my Dexcom G6 transmitter that I reset has been acting kind of funny. I've gotten almost 4 months use out of it. I will be getting a new one the middle of this week. So I've been doing a little more finger sticking, but I thought I would give you a good idea of maybe what the diabetic health journal looks like. I am on day number 13 of month 1. I woke up this morning, I was 91. I had my breakfast, 1 hour post meal, my monitor was still working, I was 121, and then 2 hours post, my monitor kind of faded out, it's not working right now. I am at 111 as of a half an hour ago, so I'm doing pretty gosh darn good, and I feel normal. So I think we're just going to consider that a pretty good blood sugar day, but I've had some ones where they've been kind of wacky. Not this day, but you can see this day I had a lot more higher blood sugars, at least in my opinion. Like I said, I define high as anything over 140 milligrams per deciliter or just over 7 millimoles. So with that being said, we'll jump into the video. Hey everyone, it's Maddie. Welcome back to my channel. And today's video, I'm going to be busting 11 type 1 diabetes myths that a lot of people have in their minds. And I've had a couple of these in my head too long before I was diagnosed, before I educated myself on this disease. Obviously, when I was first diagnosed, you kind of get to learn a little bit more of the causes, what doesn't cause, and what things still float around out there. Now, there are tons of articles, tons of videos on this, but the more and more this gets spread around, the quicker we're going to put an end to all these myths and misconceptions that people have about type 1 diabetes. So with that being said, let's jump into the myths. So the first myth I have on here is that type 1 diabetes is our fault that it happened. This is not true. Type 1 diabetes is not our fault. Type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disease. Unless you had your pancreas removed from other trauma or other illness, type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disease. It basically means that our own immune system mistakenly attacked the cells in our pancreas that secrete insulin. And this is nothing that we did as kids or nothing we had at birth or whatever the case may be to cause it. So it's not diet induced, it's not weight induced, it's not exercise induced. We didn't eat too many candies, we didn't do any activities that could have caused this. It's a combination of possible genetic factors and possible environmental triggers that cause our own bodies to basically turn against our pancreas. So a lot of people do think that type 1 diabetics did something to cause their disease. This is not the case. Type 2s even, they could often possibly cause their own diabetes from not eating properly or not getting enough exercise to cause insulin resistance. But even so, some of them have more of a genetic component where no matter how good they eat or how much activity they have in their life, they may still end up with type 2 diabetes and have insulin resistance. So it's not our fault that type 1 diabetes happened. Number 2 is you have to be a young person or a child in order to develop type 1 diabetes. This is not the case. My doctor told me the most common now is anybody under the age of 21 is considered in normal range to have type 1 diabetes. Now, I would say a lot of people are still diagnosed in their juvenile years, say the ages between age 5 to 15. Some are diagnosed when they're babies and even younger, and some are diagnosed obviously way older. I was just outside that 5 to 15 range. I was 19 years old, but by the terms of my doctor and today's standards, this is considered very normal. But you can develop type 1 diabetes at any point in your life. You could be in your 90s, you could be in your 50s, you could be in your 60s, you could be 2 months old. You can develop type 1 diabetes at any time during your life. You do not have to be young to develop it. For example, my aunt was much older when she developed it, and my cousin and I were around our teenage years when we developed it. So we were not super duper young, but we weren't like crazy old either. It doesn't make a difference. Type 1 diabetes strikes anybody of any gender, any race, any religion, any age. Okay? It doesn't matter. Type 1 diabetes is a risk to everybody. Number 3 is that we can't have any sugars or have anything sweet, and we have to restrict our diet to a minimal. This isn't true. Now, some people do restrict the amount of carbohydrates they put in their body to better control their blood sugars. I just count my carbs, but I do find that if I go above 60 grams of carbs per meal, I have a more difficult time controlling my blood sugar, so I try not to exceed that too much. And if I am going to exceed that, I most likely will have to take a shot at the beginning of my meal and then maybe 1.5 to 2 hours after to keep blood sugars in normal ranges. What I consider normal range is 70 to 140, which is about 3.9 millimoles to about 7.3 millimoles. That's what I consider normal blood sugar range, and this is pretty much true for most non-diabetics. I don't restrict my diet. I eat whatever the heck I want. Life is short, you guys. Enjoy your carbohydrates, enjoy the foods you want, but you do have to be a little bit more cautious than a person without diabetes, because obviously you need to know how many carbs are in it, how it may impact your blood sugar, what you did previous, and monitor what goes on after you give yourself the injection and after you eat, etc., etc., to make sure your blood sugars aren't going haywire. But most of us probably do watch a little bit more than what we eat than what we used to. I was always a fairly healthy eater, but nonetheless, I still try to eat foods that are more safe for blood sugars, foods that are lower on the glycemic index, less foods that are starchy, etc., etc., added sugars. You get the point. But we can have anything. We can have sugar. And by the way, you guys, sugar is found in just about everything you eat. When it says carbohydrate on the box label, that means sugar. I mean, that's what sugars are made out of, is carbohydrates. It might not be as simple of a sugar as just pure glucose, but it is still sugar and will get eventually converted into glucose in your body. So we can have anything we want to eat. It wasn't induced by our diet. And that's all you can say about number 3. So number 4 is managing type 1 diabetes is easy peasy lemon squeezy. You just need to give yourself an insulin injection and you're good to go. Not the case. You got to count carbs. You got to give yourself the injection. You have to know how much to give yourself so that you don't skyrocket and that you don't plummet. You may have to get the timing right as far as the speed at which you eat and the timing of your insulin injection to avoid blood sugar spikes that are really, really high. You have to be able to make sure that you're taking the proper insulin if you are on multiple daily injections like myself. If you're a pump user, you have to change your pump out. If you use a CGM like me, you have to monitor that and make sure that is working, and make sure that you have all the materials you need to finger stick. Finger stick before meals, after meals, before you drive, before you exercise, after meals. It is not just as simple as taking a shot and going for it. It's continuous management every single day, 24/7, 365. There is no breaks. It is not an easy disease to manage. Some days, no matter how good we control ourselves, there are things outside that affect us. Stress, anxiety, temperature, any of them environmental triggers I talked about in my previous videos can absolutely have a huge impact on our blood sugars. No matter sometimes how much we do, we will still have highs and lows. So type 1 diabetes is not an easy disease to manage. It may just look easy to other people because we get so accustomed to doing it, but in the truly some days when we struggle, it is hard. Some days it is hard to push through day to day, knowing that we have to fight the same demon that lives inside us every single day until they find a cure. So type 1 diabetes is not easy to manage. Number 5, insulin is a cure. Absolutely not. Insulin is a form of treatment to keep us alive. A cure would mean not having to worry about that. Being in a non-diabetic state where we can eat whatever the heck we want, body does the job, and we are set to go. Insulin is just a form of treatment to keep us alive and keep our blood sugars as normal as possible so that we can continue to function, live, and fulfill our hopes, dreams, and goals, and whatever the case may be. Insulin allows us to basically metabolize our sugars. Just like you make insulin in your pancreas, our pancreas doesn't make it, so we have to get it from an outside source via injections or an insulin pump. So that is kind of how that works. But insulin is not a cure, but we are hoping very, very soon that there will be a cure. Now, I talked about this. I don't know if there's going to be one in my lifetime, but if there is, great. If there isn't, that's okay too. I've learned to live with it either direction, but we are progressing more and more each day about doing research with stem cells and trying to find ways that we can make other cells in our pancreas that aren't the beta cells to secrete insulin so the immune system doesn't attack it, immunotherapy, etc., etc. They are developing new ways to manage our diabetes besides just taking insulin and hoping to lead to a cure very soon. Number 6, diabetes is contagious. No, it is not. It is something that happens within your own body. I don't know how much that myth still goes around, but maybe some people would be freaked out that if they're next to a diabetic that they're going to catch diabetes and they're going to be diabetic. That's not the case. Same as like having cancer, that it happens within your own body. It's not like a common cold or the flu or strep throat where it's a bacterial or virus that literally enters your body and you have to fight through it. It's all autoimmune and all within yourself. It's just like cancer. It's like certain other hereditary or genetic diseases. It's nothing you can catch. Number 7 is diabetes can be reversed with diet and exercise. Nope, not type 1 diabetes. Once you have it, you are stuck. There's no turning back. Your pancreas no longer functions. You have to move forward with synthetic insulin and continue to live your life as a type 1 diabetic. Now, type 2 diabetics can kind of return their blood sugars back to normal with diet and exercise first, just because the only problem they mostly have is that their body does not properly respond to the insulin they make. They still secrete enough insulin, but their body just doesn't know what to do with it or doesn't really recognize their own insulin. Whereas with a type 1 diabetic, our problem is that we don't secrete enough insulin or any insulin at all to control blood sugar. So no form of amount of diet or exercise is going to reverse the diabetes. And even with type 2, that will help, but most of the time, once you've had insulin resistance, you're going to have to deal with it. But there are ways that they can kind of work around it a little easier, but you've got diabetes, you have it. Number 8 is that you can outgrow type 1 diabetes. This is not the case. Anybody that was diagnosed young will have it for the rest of their life until they get a new pancreas or a cure is found. And the same with me and everybody else. This is a disease that you do not outgrow. This is a disease that stays with you for life. This disease is permanent, just like a lot of other things in our life that are more permanent. But as things change in the medical field, so can things changing with the management of type 1 diabetes, from technologies to more advancements and more ideas to find cures for this very annoying and stressful autoimmune disease. So no, you cannot outgrow type 1 diabetes. The 9th myth I have here is that high or low blood sugar means that we are not taking care of ourselves. This is not the case. Like I had mentioned previously, sometimes no matter what you do, your blood sugar will go high. And no matter how much insulin you take, it might stay high. And sometimes no matter how much you eat or how little you do, your blood sugar still may plummet. That is the kind of things that you have to worry about and deal with as a type 1 diabetic, because the body perfectly tries to manage that blood sugar for you, but because we cannot do that on our own anymore, we manually have to control our blood sugar. And just like with anything else, manual control may have some human error involved. Sometimes our highs and lows are induced by ourselves, and other times they are induced by things that we can't control. Possibly heavy stress could drive a blood sugar super duper high. Hormones or anything else could drive a blood sugar high or low. Temperature, we can't control those things, but the best that we can do is to control what we do eat, or watching a little bit of what we eat and counting the carbs and dosing ourselves properly. Like I said before, we can eat anything as long as we're a little bit more taking the few extra steps to kind of just watch out for the carbs and knowing how to dose yourself. So if we have a high or low blood sugar, it doesn't mean that we're not taking care of ourselves. It just means that something kind of happened that we couldn't control, and that's something that we deal with whether or not people realize it. Sometimes you see me walking around and my blood sugar is really high, and I may not feel good, but life goes on. You deal with it and you move on. Some days you might see me and I'm not really responding, or I'm not as, happy-go-lucky as I am, and I just don't feel very good. A good chance that my blood sugar may be low and you don't realize it. I just ate something sugary, or I'm going to eat something sugary, and I'm going to move on with my life. It's stuff that you just kind of deal with on a day-to-day basis. You can't worry from one day to the next, because there are no 2 days that are the same with type 1 diabetes. Number 10 is we can't exercise, be active, or have children. No, no, and no. These are totally false. If anything, exercise and activity is very beneficial to anybody, but more so to people with as diabetics, because it helps increase your insulin sensitivity and makes it easier for us to control other factors that have to deal with blood sugar. And obviously, keeping up on your activity is good for your heart. It is good for all your muscles, and obviously, people that keep up on their activity levels are going to stay in a healthier weight most of the time. And can't have children. This absolutely is not true. If you are a male, you can still have children. If you're, produce a child with a woman. If you are a woman like myself, you can still have healthy pregnancies as a type 1 diabetic. There are a few more steps involved, but the main goal for any pregnant diabetic woman, especially a type 1, is to keep her blood sugars in as good control as possible to keep a healthy pregnancy, have a healthy delivery, and have a healthy fetus. Like I said, there's a few more steps involved. Now, the risk of having your children having type 1 diabetes is minimal. For a female, it's a lot lower than a male, but even the male's odds of passing on possible diabetic genes to his children, type 1 diabetic genes to his children, are very, very minimal. It's nothing I'm concerned about. I still want to have children. It's nothing that I am worried about. You deal with it as you go. You can't stop your life, and don't let something like this autoimmune disease stop you from achieving what you want to achieve in life. And one of those things, if one of those things is having children, then go for it. There's nothing wrong with it. You just have to do a few more extra things than a non-diabetic woman would have to do, involving your blood sugar control, insulin dosing, etc., etc. But you definitely can do anything and everything with type 1 diabetes. And the 11th myth I'm busting is you have to have a family history of type 1 diabetes in order to get it. This isn't true. Now, I particularly have a family history, but it is an aunt and a cousin. They are not mother and child, but I do have 2 family members that I am blood related to that also have type 1 diabetes. But many people do find out when they are diagnosed that they are the first in their family to have type 1 diabetes. There can be a familial link with type 1 diabetes, but it does not necessarily have to happen. And just because you have a family history does not mean that you're guaranteed to get it. There are some people that have the genes and never develop type 1 diabetes. Figure that one out. And then there are some people that develop it and have never had any history of diabetes, type 1 diabetes, no faulty pancreas in their family type thing. So it doesn't make a difference, but I mean, you don't necessarily have to have it. Just like with anything else in life, sometimes you're the first in your family to find out you have something, and sometimes you're not the first. So I busted 11 type 1 diabetic myths. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you are a type 1 diabetic, I'm sure you've heard a lot of these go around, or have had doctors or people who do not have diabetes tell you what you can and can't do, but these absolutely are false. And I encourage you to share this with any of your non-diabetic family and friends to further spread awareness about a disease that has a lot of myths and misconceptions that roam around about it. If you enjoyed today's video, give it a big thumbs up. Feel free to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. We are closing in on 100 subscribers, and my diagnosis story will be going up very, very soon. So look forward to that. So anyways, until tomorrow's video, I will see you then. Take care, God bless, be kind, spread positivity, and be thankful. Bye, everyone.